Scano. Good evening. My name is Jody Harbour. I identify as an urban Indigenous woman. My great-grandmother was of the Cayuga Nation, Haudenosaunee Confederacy, colonially termed as Six Nations, and thank you. Thanks. And also called Iroquois people. And so as a co-founder of Grandmother's Voice, a grassroots Indigenous-led nonprofit organization here in the Halton region, I'm here to acknowledge the work that we're sharing with you, the work that we do. I appreciate this opportunity to address a matter of governance, to inform the Board of Trustees with facts that you may not have been privy to through the fragmented report provided on March 6th. Grandmother's Voice was established in response to the lack of Indigenous services and support for local Indigenous people. Our organization has been guided in consultation with Indigenous grandmothers and elders from numerous nations. We have created a healthy strategy for developing a community founded on traditional knowledge while incorporating multi-contemporary frameworks that protect the urban Indigenous population. These foundational frameworks have been instrumental building capacity and sustainability for our organization and across our nation. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, the United Nations on the Rights of Indigenous People, and the Urban Indigenous Action Plan are frameworks designed to guide the implementation of Indigenous principles into policies and practices of colonial structures and systems of oppression, such as the education system. These Indigenous frameworks take precedence over any other colonial policies when dealing with Indigenous people and matters. Each of these frameworks begin with the federal common law duty to consult, based on jurisdictional interpretation of the obligations of the Crown in relation to treaty rights of Indigenous peoples of Canada. Law proceeds over policies. As treaty people, our community was not consulted. We are all treaty people. And since March 7th, I've consulted with both the chief of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations. I've consulted with the chief of the Six Nations of the Grand River, urban Indigenous partners, parents, Indigenous community members, elders from across our provinces. I have a letter from Chief Sherry Lynn Hill of the Six Nations in support of our efforts. Consultation is the first step in everything we do, not the last one. It's also about relationships, reciprocity, inclusion, diversity, and healing. The conduct and approach of this board didn't even get through the first two steps of their own standards of behavior. As stated in their code of conduct, respect and comply with all applicable federal, provincial, and municipal laws, demonstrate honesty and integrity. You can visit the Code of Conduct on your board site for a complete list of their responsibilities. What I've witnessed and have been thrusted into since March 7th is disrespect for these frameworks, perpetuation of systemic oppression, systemic racism, discrimination, and most disappointingly, coercion that has caused further harm, with a divide and conquer attack on our urban Indigenous people, our Indigenous community. Let them figure it out. Like the historical playbook my elders explained to me. And when I spoke those harsh words, if you felt that in your body, okay, that's truth. And that's what our Indigenous community has been feeling for months and probably centuries. So over the last weeks, the board have been monopolizing on their perception of what's going on by sending out emails to different stakeholders. They've been slightly different angles, leaving out specific details, further confusing messages. Grandmother's Voice received a hard copy of speaking notes from employees stating how disappointed they are in the actions of their employers. Non-Indigenous students have emailed us. They've asked us why our people would do this to them, why we would do this to their students, to their schools, to their community. Self-identified Indigenous parents received an email just before Easter holiday, negating important details and asking for input, persuading a comment on the name change. As stated in the self-identification policy, the intended purpose of the self-ID policy is to support anti-colonial efforts across the Halton District School Board. It's to be used critically analyze, examine, and address existing board structures, processes, policies, and programs that are not in alignment with inherent Indigenous human rights. This policy has been abused, and the board's actions have caused harm in our whole community. Grandmother's Voice asks the trustees and those who submitted the report, Director Curtis Innes, Superintendent Proto, Manager Francie, to recall the report and retract the name change.
You're not allowed.
Grandmother's Voice invites the trustees to implement the grandfather teachings, 7 grandfather teachings. If this was implemented into your policies and procedures, we wouldn't even have had any of these conversations. The grandfather teachings are honesty, bravery, truth, humility, respect, love, and wisdom. And if you could implement those into your practices and even into your thoughts when you're thinking of Indigenous people and the matters in our community, that would be appreciated by the Indigenous people. Nyawa.
Thank you, Jody. We did ask you not to speak names. So if you...
I did?
Yes, you spoke the names of 3 staff people.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. So, well, sorry about that.
That's all right. And I will remind trustees that we are speaking to questions of clarification regarding governance, not regarding a particular school. Please go ahead, Trustee Shook.
Thank you. Is it okay if I call you Jody?
Yeah, please. Thank
you, Jody, for your delegation. Now, you gave a really great overview of the relationships you forged across the communities and all the work you've done in giving voice to the urban Indigenous voices. In your delegation, you mentioned that you had not been consulted. So my question for you is, did anybody from the board reach out to you prior to the motion being passed on March the 6th? And since then, have there been any conversations between you and the board?
No, they've never reached out to us, actually. I mean, I've reached out to them several times, actually. In 2020, several times I reached out to be on the Indigenous Education Advisory Council with no response. I've also sent something to the director about training that we do. We do very intensive training for educators, for healers, for our community to build capacity. No response. It got passed off to some of his team. Never heard anything else. As a parent, no, not included at all. They know about us. I'm myself as a trailblazer in a school that they're talking about. I'm in the community. There's no reason to not, when Indigenous people know the policy is consultation, you find the people because they're there. So no, they haven't even engaged, asking for support or not even support, just any kind of, question, involvement.
Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up?
Oh, no. Sorry, there was also the second part.
So I do. Thank you, because you noticed
Thank
that
you.
I didn't.
Yeah.
Following the motion, so have there been any discussions that you have had with trustees, members of staff regarding what's transpired as of now?
Thank you. I did forward an email to the trustees, to all of you, because I felt like, we've been doing this work a long time, and I didn't realize that, maybe I should have reached out, because really in the rule and the law of, the rule of, liberating people, you're not supposed, you shouldn't have to reach out to people. You shouldn't have to reach out to the people that are liberating themselves. You should be reaching out to them. And so, in that, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Sorry, help me again for a second. Yes. Okay. Sorry. My conversation. Sorry. This is a difficult part of the conversation. And I wasn't sure, because as I stated in my email to the trustees, it's not about throwing things around in here. And our Indigenous people have been through a lot. Trying to build community, we've been constantly divided by by organizations that have power and privilege and control of our money. And so in this situation, when I reached out to the director or the school, the board, I introduced the chief of the Mississaugas of the Credit, because I called her immediately and said, why would you do this to us? Because that's what it was framed as, is that the partner made this decision. And so what I did is I connected them in an email, and we set up an appointment to talk right after that, myself and the director. And when it was shown that maybe I wouldn't just show up by myself and that other people would show up to support me, which were the chiefs and a few other supports, that meeting was downsized to a phone call on a Friday afternoon at 3:30 when it was a really tight schedule. And I had no idea who was on the other end of his phone. But when I talked to him and he said, or they said, what makes you think that your voice is more important than the person who wrote the letter about the derogatory term? And that was horrible. And I was there by myself listening to something like that. That was my conversation.
Thank you. Trustee Rocha.
I'm at a bit of a loss for words. I'm sorry, Jody. You mentioned in your delegation that you had a letter of support from the chief, I believe you said, of the Six Nations, supporting. What is it exactly that the chief is supporting?
I can show this to you to circulate it, but I have to collect it. They've asked me, they don't want this in the public eye. But it's basically just saying my efforts. They're supporting my efforts, whatever they are. If it extends to whatever it extends to, they're supporting, my efforts. And so I can send that to you because I, again, don't want to put that on public knowledge, and you don't have to share it.
I'm sorry, no, we don't share any handouts at this point.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's okay. I couldn't take the chance of putting this in an email, so I
completely understand.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, thank you. I can read it if you want me to read it then. Can I read it?
Sure. You may read it.
Yeah, okay.
Just to clarify, that would be into public. We are being
Yes, but it's a hard copy. They don't want this to be in public, right? Yeah, I understand. I asked them and they said that was okay. They just didn't. Okay, you have to understand, and maybe I can clarify this right here, that the First Nations communities have no jurisdiction in our urban community. Okay? So they support us, but they have no jurisdiction in our community. So that is a huge misunderstanding that some of these organizations in urban communities don't understand. And I'm not saying they can't come in here and make decisions and do whatever. If they're hired as a service, of course. But we're talking about a community that's trying to build capacity and support each other. And so thank you for bringing the matter to the proposed renaming, located in Halton Region to the attention of the 59th Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council. Our council heard this matter on March 25th at an in-camera session. As a result of our deliberations, I'm pleased to write this letter on behalf of the 59th Six Nations Grand River Elected Council to support your efforts to keep. Please be advised that should you wish to make this letter available to the public, kindly advise and, Nyewa Chief Sherry Lynn Hill. And this was my first conversation with her, was just, can you help us? This is not right. Just help us, because the community was harmed. It was harmed because the 20 years, this school, this is a community that loves why it's there, what it's named. They built it around that, and the work that we do, it's not just in stopping our families. We've created a garden, we've created community, we've created events, ceremony. We created things that for some reason our board's not acknowledging. And that's harmful. So I appreciate being here. I appreciate this opportunity and the support from our community, because the community they were coming to my home. They were asking how my children were and how our community was. These are people that care about what happens to our community.
Nothing about us without us.
Thank you very much for your delegation this evening, Jody, and we do appreciate your words and your wisdom, and I speak with gratitude to you for coming forward. I know that was not easy for you, and we have to work together, obviously, to move forward in a good way.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.